The traitors' market was where you went when your own kingdom wanted you erased. And as Soraya stood among the condemned, wrists bound in iron, she didn't try to hide her face. Everyone already knew what she was: a failed assassin, a broken spy, the woman who had been sent to kill the Alpha King of Valdron 3 years ago and couldn't bring herself to do it. So her own people had branded her and dragged her here to be sold like livestock. She expected to be bought by a mine owner or a brothel keeper. She expected a slow death. What she didn't expect was him. Alpha King Calder of Valdron walked through those doors and the entire market went silent. They called him the merciless, the king who had executed his own mate when she betrayed him. The ruler who had never once in his reign shown forgiveness to anyone who crossed him. He walked past warlords and merchants without a glance and stopped directly in front of Soraya. "I'll take her," he said. The crowd erupted in disbelief. Why would a king who never forgives betrayal choose the very woman who had been sent to kill him? Soraya didn't understand either. Not until he made his terms clear. He would keep her. He would protect her. He would never ask about her past. But she must never lie to him. She agreed, believing her secret was safe. She had no idea he already knew exactly who she was. The traitors' market operated once a year in the border city of Kesreth, a lawless stretch of land that belonged to no kingdom and answered to no crown. Here, the condemned were sold, spies whose missions had failed, soldiers who had deserted, nobles who had plotted against their own bloodlines. They came in chains, stripped of rank and name, and left in the hands of whoever paid the highest price. Soraya had been standing on the wooden platform since dawn. The iron cuffs around her wrists had rubbed her skin raw. The thin shift they'd given her did nothing against the cold mountain wind, but she didn't shiver. She'd stopped feeling the cold weeks ago, somewhere between the dungeon and the cart that had brought her here. Around her, other prisoners wept or prayed or stared at nothing. A man to her left kept muttering about his innocence. A woman behind her had tried to escape twice, and now stood with her ankles shackled together. Soraya did none of these things. She simply waited. The brand on her shoulder blade burned with phantom pain, a serpent eating its own tail. The mark of Vethros, her homeland, seared into her flesh not as a sign of belonging, but as a sign of failure. She had been their most promising spy, trained since childhood to infiltrate, to seduce, to kill. 3 years ago, they had given her the most important mission of her life: assassinate Alpha King Calder of Valdron. She had crossed the border under a false name. She had worked her way into his household as a servant. She had gotten close enough to poison his wine, to slit his throat in his sleep, to end the war between their kingdoms with a single death. And she couldn't do it. Soraya still didn't fully understand why. A force she couldn't name had stopped her hand every time. The way he spoke to his people. The weariness behind his cold eyes. A flicker of humanity that made her hesitate one night too many, until she realized she could never complete the mission. So she had fled. For 2 years, she had hidden in the northern villages, living under a false name, trying to forget. Then Vethros had found her. The trial had been brief. The sentence absolute. She was to be sold at the traitors' market, the proceeds going to fund a new assassin who might actually succeed where she had failed. "Next lot!" the auctioneer called, his voice hoarse from hours of shouting. "Female, 24 years, trained in combat and infiltration, former operative of Vethros. Reserve price is 50 gold. The crowd stirred with mild interest. 50 gold for a trained spy was a bargain. But the brand on her shoulder marked her as a traitor to her own people, which meant she could never be trusted. 40 gold, someone called from the back. 45. 50. The bidding crawled upward. A mine owner, a mercenary captain, a brothel keeper with hungry eyes. Soraya stared over their heads, refusing to look at any of them. Then the great doors at the far end of the hall burst open. Every voice stopped mid-word. Every head turned. An alpha presence rolled through the entrance like a winter storm, and Soraya felt it in her bones before she saw him. Raw power. Ancient bloodline. The kind of dominance that made lesser wolves drop to their knees without being asked. And then she saw his face. Her heart stopped. "Gods above," the auctioneer whispered. "It's him." Alpha King Calder of Valdron walked into the traitors' market as if he owned every soul inside it. He was taller than she remembered. That was Soraya's first coherent thought as the king moved through the crowd, which parted before him like water around stone. His hair was darker than she recalled, deep brown shot through with strands of silver at the temples. His face was harder, the angles sharper, as if the years had carved away anything soft. But his eyes were the same, gray as storm clouds, cold as the northern glaciers, and utterly, completely merciless. They called him the king who never forgives. The rumors said he had executed his own mate 5 years ago when she'd conspired with his enemies. He had carried out the sentence himself, they whispered, had torn out her throat in front of the entire court, and never shed a single tear. Since then, no one who had betrayed him had ever survived to tell the tale. And now he was here, at a trader's market, walking directly toward the platform where she stood. "Your Majesty," the auctioneer stammered, dropping into a clumsy bow. "We are honored beyond words. If you're seeking servants, we have far better stock in the—" "Continue," Calder said. His voice hadn't changed either. Low and cold, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. Soraya had heard that voice give orders, had heard it laugh once, late at night, when he'd thought he was alone. Had heard it speak of his kingdom with a weariness that had made her hesitate just long enough to ruin everything. She kept her head down, her hair falling across her face. He couldn't recognize her. It had been 3 years. She'd been a servant then? One of dozens. She'd kept to the shadows, done her work quietly, waited for the right moment that had never come. He couldn't possibly remember her. The auctioneer's voice trembled as he resumed. "Current lot, female, trained operative, reserve price 50 gold. Current bid is 50. Do I hear 55? Silence. The entire hall watched as the Alpha King climbed the 3 steps to the platform. He moved past the other prisoners without a glance, past the weeping man, past the shackled woman, past all of them until he stood directly in front of Soraya. She could smell him now. Pine and wood smoke and frost beneath it all, like snow on stone. Her wolf stirred for the first time in months, and she shoved it down viciously. "Look at me," he said quietly. Soraya's hands trembled. She raised her head slowly, letting her hair fall back, and their gazes locked. Nothing in his expression changed. He studied her face the way one might study a map, cataloging every detail. The scar on her jaw from her training years, the slight crook in her nose where it had been broken and healed wrong, the shadows under her eyes from weeks of sleepless nights. The moment stretched. Did he know? Could he see the truth written on her face? Could he smell the fear bleeding through her carefully constructed calm? "This one," Calder said finally, turning to the auctioneer. "What is her crime?" The auctioneer consulted his ledger with shaking hands. "Failed assassination attempt, Your Majesty. She was sent to eliminate a foreign ruler but could not complete the mission. Her own kingdom has condemned her for cowardice and— I'll take her." The words landed like a blade. Absolute silence fell over the hall. "Your Majesty," the auctioneer choked out, "perhaps there's been some misunderstanding. This woman is a trained assassin. She was sent to kill— I know exactly what she is." Calder's voice didn't rise, but the edge in it made the auctioneer take a step backward. "Name your price." 500 gold. Several people in the crowd gasped. It was 10 times the reserve price. Extortion. Calder didn't blink. Done. He turned to face Soraya again, and for one terrible moment, his winter gray eyes held hers with an intensity that stripped away every defense she had. Then he walked off the platform, and two of his guards moved forward to take her chains. The crowd erupted in whispers. Why would the king, who never forgives betrayal by a traitor? Why would he pay 10 times her worth? What did he want with her? Soraya didn't know. But as she was led toward the doors, one thought kept circling through her mind. He had looked at her as if he already knew exactly who she was. The castle of Valdron rose from the mountains like a thing grown rather than built. Soraya had seen it before, 3 years ago, when she'd walked through its gates with forged papers and murder in her heart. It had been autumn then, the leaves turning gold, the air crisp with the promise of winter. Now it was early spring, and snow still clung to the peaks above the highest towers. But the castle looked the same, gray stone and iron gates, banners of deep blue snapping in the wind. And everywhere, guards in polished armor watching her with expressions that ranged from curiosity to contempt. They brought her through a side entrance, away from the main halls, and up a winding staircase to a door of dark oak. "Wait here," the guard said, and disappeared inside. Soraya stood in the corridor, still bound, still wearing the thin shift from the market. Her feet were numb from the cold stone floor. Her wrists ached beneath the iron cuffs. The door opened again. "He'll see you now." The room beyond was a study, smaller than she expected for a king. Bookshelves lined the walls. A fire burned low in the hearth. Maps and documents covered the desk in organized chaos, and standing by the window, backlit by pale morning light, was Calder. He had removed his traveling cloak. Without it, she could see the breadth of his shoulders beneath his black shirt, the way the fabric pulled tight across his chest. But another detail caught her attention. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows. Scars covered his forearms. Dozens of them. Some were thin white lines, long-heeled. Others were newer, raised and red. They crisscrossed his skin in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, as if each one marked a specific wound. Soraya looked away quickly. "Sit," Calder said. A chair had been placed in front of the desk. Soraya moved toward it carefully, her chains clinking with each step. She sat. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then Calder moved to his desk and sat across from her. Up close she could see the weariness in his face, the shadows beneath his eyes that mirrored her own. He looked like a man who hadn't slept well in years. "I'm going to have your chains removed," he said quietly. "And then I'm going to explain the terms of your presence here. You will listen. You will not interrupt. When I'm finished, you may ask questions." Soraya nodded. He gestured, and a servant appeared from somewhere behind her. The iron cuffs fell away, and she rubbed her raw wrists instinctively. "First term," Calder said, his storm-colored eyes fixed on her face. "You belong to me now. Your kingdom sold you. I bought you. Under the laws of Kesreth, that makes you my property, until I decide otherwise." Soraya said nothing. "Second term. I will never ask about your past. What you did before today, who you were, what missions you were sent on. None of that matters here. Your history is your own." Her heart stuttered. He was giving her permission to keep her secrets. Why? "Third term." His voice dropped lower. "You will never lie to me. Not about the present, not about the future. I don't care about yesterday, but from this moment forward, every word you speak to me will be the truth." "And if I do lie?" Soraya asked quietly. Pain flickered behind his eyes, or perhaps memory. "Then I will know," he said simply, "and I will act accordingly." The threat was clear enough. She'd heard the stories. His own mate had lied to him, and he had torn out her throat. "Those are my terms," Calder finished. Do you accept them? Soraya looked at him, this cold king who should hate everything she represented. A traitor, an assassin, a woman sent to kill him. And yet he was offering her a future without her past. Yes, she said. I accept. Calder nodded once, then rang a small bell on his desk. A woman entered, older, with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a practical bun. This is Marin, Calder said. She will see you to your chambers. You'll be given clothes, food, whatever you need. Soraya stood, uncertain. And what am I to do here? What role am I meant to serve? For the first time, tension eased slightly from his expression. Not warmth, exactly, but less frozen. For now, he said, you survive. Everything else comes later. Marin led her through corridors of gray stone, up another staircase, to a room that made Soraya stop in the doorway. It was beautiful. A canopied bed with soft linens, a fire already burning in the hearth, a window overlooking the mountains, fresh flowers on the table, and a tray of food that made her stomach clench with sudden hunger. This can't be right, Soraya whispered. Marin smiled gently. It's what His Majesty ordered. You're to be comfortable here. But I'm a prisoner. You're his. Marin's voice was matter-of-fact. That's different. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. A word of advice, she said quietly. The king has been alone for a very long time. Since he executed Lady Ilya, he hasn't let anyone close. Not advisors, not servants, certainly not women. Her eyes met Soraya's. You're the first person he's brought into this castle in 5 years. I don't know what that means. But I know you should be careful. Careful of what? Marin's expression flickered. The last woman he showed mercy to was his mate, and he killed her himself when she lied to him. Then she was gone, and Soraya stood alone in her beautiful prison, wondering what game the merciless king was playing, and how long she had before he revealed his true intentions. 3 days passed in strange silence. Soraya was fed well. She was given clothes that fit, soft fabrics in deep greens and grays. Servants brought her books when she asked, and no one stopped her from walking the castle grounds as long as she stayed within the inner walls. But she didn't see the king. She caught glimpses of him sometimes, crossing a distant courtyard or disappearing through a doorway. Once, she saw him training with his guards in the practice yard below her window, his movements brutal and efficient, his scarred forearms gleaming with sweat. But he never summoned her, never spoke to her, never acknowledged her existence. It was the 4th morning when the door to her chambers opened without a knock. A woman swept inside, tall and sharp-featured, with copper hair coiled in elaborate braids and eyes the color of burnt amber. Her dress was expensive, her bearing aristocratic, and her expression made it clear she considered Soraya an insect unworthy of her attention. So, the woman said, circling Soraya slowly, you're the traitor he dragged home. Soraya stood very still. And you are? Lady Fenella Ashworth, cousin to the late queen. The woman's lips curved into a blade of a smile. I've been part of this court since before you were born. I was here when Calder married Ilya. I was here when he killed her. The name landed like a stone in still water. Ilya, the mate he had executed. What do you want? Soraya asked carefully. Fenella stopped circling. She stood close enough that Soraya could smell her perfume, floral and cloying. I want to understand, Fenella said, why our king would pay 500 gold for a failed assassin from Vethros. Why he would house her in chambers fit for a noble. Why he would keep her close when he hasn't let anyone close in 5 years. Perhaps you should ask him. I'm asking you. Soraya met those amber eyes without flinching. I don't know his reasons. He hasn't told me. Fenella studied her for a long moment, and calculation sharpened her expression. You truly don't know, do you? She laughed, a brittle sound. You have no idea what you've walked into. Then enlighten me. Fenella moved to the window, looking out at the mountains. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. Ilya wasn't just his mate. She was his everything. When Calder bonded with her, everyone said it was the most powerful connection they'd ever witnessed. He would have done anything for her, given her anything. She paused. And then she betrayed him. How? She was feeding information to Vethros. Fenella turned back, her eyes locked on Soraya's face. Your kingdom. Your people. She was helping them plan an assassination attempt on Calder himself. The words hit Soraya like a physical blow. Ilya had been working with Vethros, the same kingdom that had sent Soraya 3 years later to finish what Ilya's conspiracy had started. He found out, Fenella continued, discovered the letters, the meetings, all of it. And when he confronted her, she lied, looked him in the eyes and lied. Her voice hardened. So he killed her, ripped out her throat in front of the entire court, and he hasn't been the same since. Soraya's mouth was dry. Why are you telling me this? Fenella crossed the room in 3 swift steps, gripping Soraya's chin with cold fingers. Because I know what you are, she hissed. Failed assassin, they said at the market. But I've been watching you. The way you move, the way you observe everyone without seeming to. You were trained by the best Vethros had. Her grip tightened. And 3 years ago, Vethros sent their best operative to finish what Ilya started. An assassin who got inside these very walls, who got close to the king, and then vanished without completing the mission. Soraya couldn't breathe. That was you, wasn't it? Fenella whispered. You're the one they sent to kill him. Silence stretched between them. I don't know what you're talking about, Soraya said flatly. Fenella released her chin and stepped back, a knowing smile spreading across her face. Lie to me all you want, but remember his terms. You can never lie to him. She moved toward the door. And when he discovers the truth, when he realizes the woman he's showing mercy to is the very assassin who infiltrated his home, who had a blade ready for his throat. She paused at the threshold. Well, you saw those scars on his arms. Every one of them appeared after he killed Ilya. Every single one. She swept out without another word. Soraya stood frozen in the center of the room, her heart pounding, Fenella's words echoing in her skull. The scars on his arms had appeared after he killed his mate. And Soraya was the woman sent to finish what that mate had started. The summons came that evening. A servant arrived as the sun was setting, informing Soraya that the king required her presence at dinner. Not a request, a command. She was given a new dress, deep blue velvet that matched the Valdron banners, and her hair was styled by servants who didn't meet her eyes. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like a lady of the court. She felt like a lamb being dressed for slaughter. The great hall was smaller than she expected, intimate rather than grand. A single long table dominated the space, and perhaps 20 people were already seated when she arrived. Nobles, advisors, military commanders. All of them fell silent as she entered. Soraya felt their stares like physical weight, curiosity, hostility, fear. At the head of the table sat Calder. He rose as she approached, and surprise flickered across his face. Not quite hidden, quickly suppressed. You'll sit beside me, he said. Murmurs rippled through the assembled nobles. Beside him was the place of honor. The place that had been empty since Ilya's death. Soraya walked the length of the table, feeling every eye upon her. She sat. The meal began, and conversation slowly resumed around them. But Soraya noticed how the nobles kept glancing her way, noticed how they whispered behind their hands, noticed how Fenella watched from the far end of the table with a small, knowing smile. You're not eating. Calder's voice was quiet, meant only for her. Soraya looked down at her untouched plate. I'm not hungry. Liar. The word was soft, almost teasing. She glanced at him sharply. You've barely eaten in 3 days, he continued, not looking at her, cutting into his meat with precise movements. Marin reports everything to me. You pick at your food like a bird. You don't sleep. You pace your room at night. You're having me watched? I'm having you protected. There's a difference. Is there? Now he did look at her, and his eyes held an emotion she couldn't name. Several people in this castle would prefer you dead, he said quietly. They see you as a threat, a spy, a weapon I've foolishly brought inside our walls. His voice dropped lower. You need to understand. I didn't buy you on a whim. I came to that market specifically because my sources told me you would be there. I bought you for a reason. Soraya's heart hammered. What reason? Eat your dinner, he said, and perhaps I'll tell you. She ate. The food was excellent, though she barely tasted it. Around them, conversation ebbed and flowed. A commander reported on border skirmishes. An advisor discussed trade agreements. Fenella made a pointed comment about the importance of loyalty that made several people shift uncomfortably. Through it all, Calder said little. But Soraya noticed how he listened to everything, how his eyes tracked each speaker, how nothing escaped his attention. When the meal finally ended, he rose and offered her his hand. Walk with me. It wasn't a request. They left the great hall together, and Soraya heard the whispers explode behind them the moment the doors closed. Calder led her through torchlit corridors, past guards who bowed silently, until they reached a small courtyard she hadn't seen before. The night air was cold and crisp. Stars scattered across the sky like spilled salt. A fountain stood in the center of the courtyard, its water frozen into strange, beautiful shapes. Calder stopped at the fountain's edge. 3 years ago, he said quietly, an assassin infiltrated this castle. A woman. Young, skilled, patient. She worked as a servant for months, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Soraya stopped breathing. One night, she got close enough to kill me. She was in my chambers while I slept. She had a blade in her hand. He turned to look at her, and his expression was unreadable. And she didn't do it. The world tilted. He knew. He had always known. I woke as she was leaving, he continued, caught just a glimpse of her face before she disappeared. I never forgot it. He stepped closer. When I heard you were being sold at the market, I came immediately. The woman who had been sent to kill me. The woman who couldn't. Soraya's voice came out as a whisper. Why? Why didn't you do it? Or why did I buy you? Both. Calder was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. I don't know why you didn't kill me. I've wondered about it for 3 years. What stayed your hand? Why you chose mercy when mercy was not required? He reached out and touched her jaw, tilting her face up toward his. But I know why I bought you. Tell me. Because in 3 years, you're the only person who's ever had the chance to kill me and chose not to. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Everyone else either wants me dead or fears me too much to get close. But you got close. You saw me. And you walked away. His hand fell. I need to know why, Soraya. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. But eventually, I need to understand what you saw that made you spare the life everyone wanted you to take. He turned and walked back toward the castle, leaving her alone in the frozen courtyard with her heart in her throat and a single thought burning through her mind. He had known all along, and instead of killing her, he had brought her home. She couldn't sleep. Soraya lay in her canopied bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the conversation in the courtyard. He knew. He had always known. And instead of executing her, instead of making an example of the assassin who had infiltrated his home, he had paid 500 gold to bring her back. Why? The question circled endlessly through her mind until the candles burned low and the fire turned to embers. Around midnight, she heard footsteps in the corridor outside her door. Heavy, uneven. They stopped just beyond her threshold. Soraya rose silently, years of training overriding conscious thought. She moved to the door and pressed her ear against the wood. Breathing, ragged and shallow. She eased the door open. Calder stood in the corridor, one hand braced against the wall. His face was pale, sheened with sweat despite the cold. His other hand pressed against his chest as if trying to hold himself together. Your Majesty. Soraya stepped forward without thinking. What's wrong? Nothing. The word came out through gritted teeth. Go back to bed. You can barely stand. I said go back to... He broke off with a sharp intake of breath. His knees buckled. Soraya caught him before he hit the ground. He was heavy, solid muscle and bone, but she'd been trained to carry wounded soldiers twice her size. She hauled his arm over her shoulders and half-dragged him through her door, kicking it shut behind them. Don't, he managed. Don't let anyone see. She understood. The king couldn't be seen weak. Whatever this was, it was a secret he kept hidden. She got him to the chair by the fire and lowered him into it carefully. His breathing was still ragged, his skin cold and clammy beneath her hands. She stepped back to the hearth and added logs to the dying fire, building it up until warmth began to fill the room. When she returned to his side, he was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. You should have let me fall, he said quietly. You would have cracked your skull on the stone floor. Perhaps that would have been fitting. Soraya knelt beside his chair, studying his face. Up close, she could see the fine lines of pain around his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way his hand still pressed against his chest. What is this? She asked. What's happening to you? For a long moment, he didn't answer. The fire crackled. The wind howled against the windows. And then, slowly, he pulled his hand away from his chest and began to unbutton his shirt. Soraya's breath caught. Scars covered his chest just as they covered his arms. But these were different. They radiated outward from a point directly over his heart in a pattern that looked almost like cracks in glass. And at the center, where his heart beat beneath skin and bone, a dim light pulsed with sickly rhythm. When I killed Ilya, he said quietly, I felt the mate bond break. It was like having my soul torn in half. His hand trembled as he touched the glowing center. But the bond didn't just break. It shattered. And the pieces, they're still inside me, poisoning me slowly. Soraya stared at the fractured pattern of scars, at the dim light pulsing beneath his skin. There's no cure, he continued. I've had every healer, every witch, every scholar examine me. They see the symptoms, they understand the damage, but none can repair it. The mate bond was too strong. Killing her while it was still intact damaged something fundamental. How long? Soraya whispered. Until what? Until it kills you. His gaze met hers, and for the first time she saw the weariness beneath the cold. Not just tiredness, resignation. The healers give me perhaps 2 years, perhaps less. The episodes are becoming more frequent, more severe. He laughed bitterly. The merciless king, felled by his own broken heart. There's poetry in it, I suppose. Soraya's throat tightened. She had been sent to kill him 3 years ago. She had stood over his sleeping form with a blade in her hand. And now she was learning that he was already dying, slowly and painfully, from the wound of killing the mate who had betrayed him. The court doesn't know the full truth, she said. It wasn't a question. They know I'm unwell. They don't know how bad it truly is. Only Marin understands the weight of it. And now you. He began buttoning his shirt with unsteady fingers. I'm telling you because you asked for truth. And because you're the only person in this castle who has nothing to gain from my death. That's not true. If you die, I become property of the crown. I'd be sold again or executed. Then perhaps we both have reasons to keep each other alive. He rose from the chair, steadier now but still pale. Soraya stood as well, and for a moment they faced each other in the firelight, closer than they'd ever been. Thank you, he said quietly, for not letting me fall. Thank you for telling me the truth. A flicker of warmth crossed his expression, quickly suppressed but not quite hidden. He reached out and touched her cheek. His hand was still cold, but gentle. So gentle it made her chest ache. You should sleep, he murmured. So should you. Sleep doesn't come easily anymore. Then stay. The words left her mouth before she could stop them. Stay here by the fire. You don't have to talk. You don't have to do anything. Just stay where it's warm. Calder stared at her as if she'd spoken in a foreign language. Why would you offer that? He asked finally. Soraya didn't know how to answer. Didn't know why she'd said it. Didn't know why the thought of him walking back to his cold chambers alone made her heart twist painfully. Because you look like you haven't been warm in a very long time, she said simply. A wall cracked behind his eyes, an ancient defense, desperately maintained, finally giving way. He didn't say anything, but he sat back down in the chair by the fire, and he stayed until dawn. Weeks passed, and the distance between them dissolved. It began with small gestures. Calder appearing at her door each evening, not with commands but with questions. How was she settling in? Had she found the library? Did she need anything? Then the questions became conversations. He would sit by her fire, and they would talk until the candles burned low. He told her about his kingdom, the challenges he faced, the enemies circling his borders. She told him about her training in Vethros, the brutal lessons, the way they had shaped her into a weapon and then discarded her when she failed to fire. Neither of them spoke about that night in his chambers. Neither of them mentioned his dying heart. But Soraya noticed that his episodes became less frequent when he was near her. She noticed how the tension drained from his shoulders as they talked. She noticed how his gaze followed her when he thought she wasn't looking, and she noticed how her own heart raced whenever he entered a room. You're staring, Calder said one evening, amusement flickering in his eyes. I was thinking. About what? About how I was sent to kill you and now I cannot imagine a world without you in it. About how your voice has become the sound I listen for each night. About how terrified I am that you're dying and I cannot stop it. About nothing important, she said instead. He studied her for a long moment, and she saw a hunger in his expression. Uncertain. Desperately restrained. Come here, he said quietly. Soraya rose from her chair and crossed to where he sat. He reached up and took her hand, his fingers cool against her skin. Gently, he pulled her down until she was kneeling before him, their faces level. I need to tell you this, he said. And I need you to listen without interrupting. She nodded. When I found Ilya's betrayal, when I realized everything she'd done, I felt a part of myself die. Not just the bond. A deeper peace. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I swore I would never let anyone that close again. Never trust. Never feel. Never risk that kind of destruction twice. Calder, I'm not finished. His voice was rough. I brought you here because I needed to understand why you spared me. That was the truth. But it wasn't the whole truth. Then what was? He held her stare and she saw it there. The secret he'd been hiding. The truth she'd been afraid to name. I brought you here because you were the only person in 3 years who made me feel anything other than cold. His hand trembled against hers. I brought you here because when I saw you on that platform, a part of me recognized you. Not as the assassin who'd spared my life. As a kindred spirit. Soraya's heart hammered. I'm dying, he continued. The healers say 2 years, but I think it's less. I can feel the poison spreading in my blood, feel my heart struggling to beat. He lifted her hand to his chest, pressing her palm against the place where the fractured bond pulsed beneath his skin. But when I'm with you, it hurts less. When I'm with you, I almost remember what it felt like to be whole. Tears burned in her eyes. I shouldn't want you, he whispered. I shouldn't feel this. Not when I have nothing to offer but a broken heart and a borrowed future. But Soraya kissed him. She didn't plan it, didn't think. She simply leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, and the world went silent. He went rigid for one heartbeat. 2. Then his hands were in her hair, and he was pulling her closer, and he was kissing her back with a desperation that stole her breath. His mouth was cool, but his grip was fierce, and Soraya felt a lock inside her chest finally click open. A cage she'd kept sealed for years. When they finally broke apart, both of them were trembling. This is madness, Calder breathed. You know what I am, what I've done, the blood on my hands. I know. I killed my own mate, tore out her throat, watched her die. I know. Then why? His voice cracked. Why would you want someone like me? Soraya cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. Because 3 years ago, I had a blade in my hand and a clear path to your throat. And I couldn't do it. Not because I was weak. Not because I was afraid. She took a shaky breath. Because even then, even when you were just a target, I saw a truth in you that made me hesitate. And now that I know you, now that I've seen who you truly are, what do you see? A man who loved so deeply that losing that love is killing him slowly. A man who executes mercy in secret because he's afraid of being seen as soft. A man who bought a failed assassin not to punish her, but to understand her. Her voice broke. I see you, Calder. And I don't want to lose you. A wall shattered in his expression. Ancient. Frozen. Defended for so long he'd forgotten it existed. He pulled her into his arms and held her against his chest, and she felt his heart beating beneath her cheek. Irregular. Struggling. But beating. Stay with me tonight, he murmured against her hair. She stayed. And in the darkness of her chambers, wrapped in each other's arms, they found an unexpected gift. Hope. Morning light filtered through the curtains. Soraya woke slowly, drifting up from the deepest sleep she'd had in years. She became aware first of warmth, then of the weight of an arm across her waist, then of the steady rhythm of breathing beside her. She opened her eyes. Calder slept beside her, his face relaxed in a way she'd never seen while he was awake. The hard lines had softened. The tension had eased. He looked younger, almost peaceful. She studied him in the pale light, memorizing every detail, the silver at his temples, the old scar on his jaw, the way his lashes cast shadows on his cheekbones. I love him, she realized. The thought was quiet and certain, not a question, not a fear, just truth. And with that truth came another. She had told him she'd hesitated 3 years ago, that a force had stayed her hand, but she hadn't told him what. She hadn't told him the real reason she'd walked away from the easiest kill of her career. She had to tell him now, before this went further, before they tangled their lives together any more deeply. He deserved to know the whole truth, even if it changed everything. She slipped from the bed and dressed quietly. By the time Calder stirred, she was sitting in the chair by the cold hearth, waiting. Soraya? He pushed himself upright, confusion in his sleep-rough voice. What's wrong? I need to tell you the rest. He went still, reading the tension in her posture. Slowly, he rose and pulled on his shirt, then moved to stand before her. Tell me. Soraya took a breath, then another. 3 years ago, I told you I hesitated. That a force stopped me from completing my mission. She forced herself to meet his gaze. I never told you what. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Your terms were no lies, and I've been lying by omission since the day you brought me here. Calder said nothing. He simply waited. The night I was supposed to kill you, I came to your chambers late, after midnight. You were supposed to be asleep. Her voice trembled. But you weren't. You were sitting by the window, alone in the dark. And you were... She stopped. The memory was so clear it hurt. I was what? He asked quietly. You were holding a locket. A small silver thing. And you were talking to it. To her. To Ilya. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You were telling her you were sorry. That you wished you'd seen the signs. That you'd give anything to go back and save her from whatever had driven her to betray you. That you still loved her, even after everything. That killing her had killed a part of you too. Calder's face had gone pale. I stood there in the shadows with a knife in my hand, Soraya continued, and I listened to a king weep for the mate he'd been forced to destroy. And I realized you weren't a monster. You were a man who had loved someone so much that her betrayal had broken you. And I couldn't... Her voice cracked. I couldn't add to that. I couldn't be another person who destroyed you. Soraya, I didn't spare you because I was weak, or because I failed. She stood, facing him. I spared you because in that moment I saw the truth of you. And I think I started falling in love with you that very night. Before I even knew your voice. Before I knew your kindness. Before any of this. She gestured at the room, at the space between them. I loved you before I had any right to. And I love you now, even though I know you're dying. Even though I know loving you might destroy me too. Calder stared at her. His expression was unreadable, his body rigid. The silence stretched until Soraya couldn't breathe. Then, slowly, the Alpha King of Valdron dropped to his knees. Calder. She stepped forward, alarmed. You saw me, he whispered. His voice was wrecked. That night, my lowest moment. The grief I've hidden from everyone. And instead of using it against me, instead of striking when I was weak. He looked up at her, and his eyes were bright with tears. You showed me mercy. I showed you humanity. No one has ever... He couldn't finish. His shoulders shook. Soraya knelt before him, taking his face in her hands. I love you, she said. Not the king. Not the reputation. You, the man who weeps for the mate he lost. The man who carries his guilt in scars. The man who bought a failed assassin because he wanted to understand. She pressed her forehead to his. I love you, Calder. And I'm not going anywhere. His arms came around her, pulling her close. I love you too, he breathed. Gods help me, I love you too. I've been fighting it since the moment I saw you on that platform. I told myself it was curiosity. Told myself it was strategy. But it was never... He broke off with a sharp gasp. His hand flew to his chest. His body went rigid. Calder? Soraya pulled back. Calder, what's... The glow beneath his shirt flared bright, brighter than she'd ever seen it. His face contorted with pain. His breath came in short, desperate gasps. No, he gritted out. Not now. Not... He collapsed. Soraya caught him before he hit the floor, but his weight dragged them both down. Help! She screamed. Someone help me! Guards burst through the door within seconds. Marin appeared moments later, her face going white when she saw the king convulsing on the floor. Get him to his chambers, Marin ordered. Now, and fetch the healers. They carried Calder through the corridors, Soraya running alongside, her hand gripping his even as his fingers spasmed and clutched. The glow beneath his shirt pulsed erratically, brightening and dimming like a heartbeat losing rhythm. The healers arrived within minutes. They worked over him with potions and herbs and muttered incantations while Soraya stood in the corner, shaking. An hour passed. 2. Finally, the head healer approached her, his expression grim. The bond fractures are spreading faster than we've ever seen. An emotional surge triggered an acceleration. We've stabilized him for now, but... He shook his head. Days. A week at most. No. Soraya's voice came out hard. There has to be a cure. Some remedy you haven't tried. My lady, we've exhausted every option. Then find new options. Marin appeared at her elbow, drawing her aside. There may be a possibility, the older woman said quietly. A path we haven't tried, because it was deemed too dangerous. Tell me. Years ago, before Ilya's betrayal was discovered, there was a healer who served the court, a woman named Seraphine. She specialized in bond magic, in the connections between mates. When Ilya died, Seraphine said the broken bond could be healed. Not by medicine, by forming a new one. Soraya's heart stuttered. A new mate bond? Yes. But the king refused. He said he would never bond again, never risk it. Marin's eyes searched hers. Seraphine was banished for pushing the matter, but she's still alive, living in the eastern mountains. If anyone can save him. Where exactly? Marin told her. Soraya was halfway to the stables when a voice stopped her cold. Going somewhere? Fenella stepped from the shadows of the corridor, her copper hair gleaming in the torchlight. She held a small vial in her hand, filled with liquid that glowed faintly green. You, Soraya breathed. What have you done? Only what should have been done years ago. Fenella smiled. Did you really think the king's condition was natural? That a broken mate bond could spread so slowly, so perfectly, keeping him weak but alive? The truth crashed over Soraya like ice water. You've been poisoning him. Such an ugly word. I prefer... managing. Fenella tucked the vial away. Calder was supposed to die years ago, but a dead king is useless. A dying king, though. A king who can barely rule, who needs his council to make decisions for him, who's too weak to notice what's happening in his own court. She laughed. That's valuable. You're working with Vethros. I work for myself. Vethros is simply a useful ally. Fenella's smile sharpened. Who do you think turned Ilya against him in the first place? Who whispered in her ear about her husband's cruelty, his coldness, his neglect? She was so easy to manipulate, so desperate to believe she was doing the right thing. Rage burned through Soraya's veins. And now? Fenella continued. Now you've come along and complicated everything. He's bonding with you. I can smell it on him. If that bond completes, my poison becomes useless. He'll heal. He'll discover everything. She drew a dagger from her sleeve. So you need to die. Fenella lunged, but Soraya had been trained since childhood. She sidestepped the blade, caught Fenella's wrist, and twisted. Bone cracked. The dagger clattered to the floor. Fenella screamed. Guards came running. Soraya held the woman pinned to the wall, her forearm pressed against Fenella's throat. You're going to tell them everything, Soraya hissed. What you did to Ilya, what you've been doing to Calder. All of it. They'll never believe. They'll believe this. Soraya reached into Fenella's pocket and pulled out the glowing vial. Evidence. And I'm sure there's more in your chambers. Fenella's face twisted with hatred. You think saving him changes anything? You're still an assassin. Still a traitor. Still nothing. Soraya leaned close. I'm the woman who loves him, she said quietly. And that makes me everything. She handed Fenella to the guards and ran for the stables. She had a healer to find. The journey to the eastern mountains took 2 days. Soraya rode through rain and wind, barely stopping to rest, driven by the knowledge that every hour brought Calder closer to death. When she finally reached the small cottage where Seraphine lived, she was exhausted, soaked, and desperate. The healer was ancient, her white hair falling past her waist, her eyes milky with age but sharp with intelligence. I know why you've come, Seraphine said before Soraya could speak. I've been watching, waiting. The bond between you and the king, it's already forming. I can see it in your aura. Can you save him? Perhaps. The healer gestured for her to sit. The broken bond has been poisoned, kept open and festering by artificial means. With the poison stopped, healing becomes possible. But not certain. What else does he need? Seraphine studied her for a long moment. He needs to release his guilt. The bond with Ilya broke because he killed her. Yes, but it stayed broken because he's been punishing himself ever since. Carrying her death like a stone around his neck. She leaned forward. He needs to forgive himself. And he needs someone who can show him that love doesn't always end in destruction. How do I do that? By completing what's already begun. Seraphine reached out and touched Soraya's chest, right above her heart. The bond between you is half formed. If you complete it, if you both choose each other fully and freely, it will overwrite the broken one. Heal what was shattered. Make him whole again. Soraya's breath caught. He refused before. He said he'd never bond again. That was before you. Before he knew what it felt like to be loved without conditions. Seraphine smiled, ancient and knowing. Go back to him. Tell him the truth about Fenella, about Ilya, about all of it. And then ask him to choose, not out of duty, not out of desperation, out of love. Soraya rode back faster than she'd come. When she burst through the castle gates, Marin was waiting. He's awake, the older woman said, tears streaming down her face. The moment we removed Fenella's poison from his system, he stabilized. He's weak, but he's asking for you. Soraya ran. She found him in his chambers, propped against pillows, pale but alive. His gaze found hers the moment she entered, and the relief in his expression made her heart crack open. You came back, he breathed. Of course I came back. She crossed to his bed and took his hand. I'll always come back. She told him everything. Fenella's confession. The truth about Ilya's manipulation. The poison that had been keeping him trapped between life and death for years. When she finished, Calder was silent for a long time. Ilya didn't betray me because she wanted to, he said finally. She was manipulated. Used. And I killed her without ever knowing. You couldn't have known. I should have asked. Should have listened. His voice broke. I was so consumed by the betrayal that I never stopped to wonder why. Soraya squeezed his hand. You can forgive her now. And you can forgive yourself. He looked at her, and she saw the war in his expression, the guilt he'd carried for 5 years, the fear of loving again, the desperate, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, he could have more than pain. The healer said there's one way to heal you completely, Soraya continued. A new bond, freely chosen, fully accepted. She brought his hand to her heart. I love you, Calder. I've loved you since before I had any right to. And I'm choosing you. Not because you're a king. Not because I have nowhere else to go. Because you're the only person who's ever seen me as more than what I was trained to be. Tears slipped down his cheeks. I don't deserve this, he whispered. After everything I've done, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to be loved. You deserve to live. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his. Choose me, Calder. Choose us. Choose to live. For one endless moment he was silent. Then his hand came up to cup her face, and he pulled her close, and he kissed her with everything he had. I choose you, he breathed against her lips. I choose us. I choose to live. The bond snapped into place like a key turning in a lock. Soraya gasped as she felt it. A golden thread connecting her heart to his, warm and strong and impossibly right. She felt his pain, his hope, his love pouring through the connection. and she felt the moment the broken bond finally healed. The glow beneath his skin flickered once, then faded. Gone. Calder pulled back, his hand flying to his chest. His eyes went wide. "It's quiet," he breathed. "For the first time in 5 years, it's quiet." He was laughing and crying at the same time, and Soraya was doing the same, and neither of them could stop. 6 months later, Soraya stood in the great hall of Valdron as Calder placed a crown upon her head. "My queen," he said, his voice carrying through the silent hall. "My mate. My heart." The court erupted in cheers. Later, after the ceremony and the feast and the endless congratulations, they stood together on the balcony overlooking the mountains. The sun was setting, painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of gold and rose. "They said you never forgive betrayal," Soraya murmured, leaning into his warmth. "They were wrong." Calder pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her hair. "I forgave you before you even confessed. I think I forgave you the moment I saw you on that platform, looking at me with those eyes that saw right through everything I pretended to be. And now? Now we write a new story." He turned her to face him, his gaze soft with love. One where the assassin saves the king, where the broken heart learns to heal. Where love doesn't destroy, it rebuilds. Soraya smiled. "I like that story." "So do I," Calder said. "So do I." They said the Alpha King never forgave betrayal. But they were wrong. Because when she confessed her love, he didn't condemn her. He dropped to his knees and wept. And in that moment, the merciless king became something else entirely. A man who finally let himself be loved. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments what you thought. I always read them, and they mean more than you know.